The city wakes before the sun, markets stir, old buses' horns blare, and hidden among the rush are the forgotten, kids like Khalid. Khalid never asked to be born into the chaos. His mother, Amina, was just 16 when she gave birth to him. She was a kayayu, a head porter in the city markets, moving from one corner to another just to survive. One night, after a long day of carrying heavy loads for strangers, she was cornered and abused by a group of deviants. That night changed the course of her life forever. A few months later, Khalid was born. Too young, too scared, and too alone, Amina tried her best. She would strap him onto her back with a piece of worn cloth, working odd jobs, cleaning homes and selling fruits at the busy bus stations under the hot sun. But the weight of life was heavier than the little boy she carried. The hunger, the exhaustion, the endless struggle, it wore her down. Eventually, when Khalid was barely 5 years old, she disappeared from his life, leaving him to face the streets alone. It happened at the lorry station in Accra, a place always crowded and noisy, where no one notices one more crying child. She placed a backpack next to him, stuffed with some old clothes and a packet of biscuits. Then she kissed his forehead, whispered something he couldn't understand, and disappeared into the crowd. That was the last time Khalid ever saw her. At first, he cried for hours, screaming into the sea of legs that passed him by. But eventually, even tears dry up when nobody listens. By evening, he had learned his first lesson on the streets as he observed other street kids. You survive or you don't. He started to beg, tiny hands tapping on taxi windows, eyes wide with hunger. Some people tossed him coins without even looking at him. Others shouted at him to move away, calling him dirty, calling him a nuisance. Khalid slept wherever he could find a spot, behind kiosks, under benches, and sometimes on the porches of some stalls after they closed when the rains came. He learned to read people's moods fast. The angry ones threw stones. The kind ones, rare as they were, might offer a leftover meat pie or a half-drunk sachet of water or juice. The dangers were constant. One afternoon, chasing a dropped coin into the street, he was almost crushed by a speeding bus. The driver cursed him loudly, threatening to beat him if he scratched his bus. He had friends once. Other street kids like him, Jamal, Samira, and Yusuf. But the streets don't keep families together. Accidents, sickness, police raids. One by one, they disappeared. Sometimes traders in the market would accuse him of stealing even when he hadn't touched anything. To them, boys like Khalid were all the same, robbers in the making. One day, after a woman's phone went missing, a group of men grabbed him, as he happened to be in the area. They didn't ask questions. They dragged him by the shirt, slapped him, kicked him, until an old man stepped in and pulled them away, muttering that they were lucky they hadn't killed someone's child by mistake. The nights were even worse. When darkness fell, the city changed. Older street boys, some carrying knives, prowled the alleys. If you had goods, they would rob them. If you had nothing, they would beat you up. Khalid learned to hide, sometimes in the abandoned trotro buses, other times behind large garbage bins, anywhere he could be invisible. Food was a luxury. Most days, he ate from the trash, stale bread, rotten fruits traders threw away, spilled leftovers from small chop bars, and anything he could find. When the hunger became too much, he begged passers-by for their snacks just to fill his stomach. One day, hunger drove Khalid to circle traffic lights. He ran between cars, wiping dusty windshields with a torn rag, hoping for a few coins. A careless driver almost knocked him down. He fell hard, scraping his knees. Instead of help, the drivers hurled insults at him. "If you die, it's your own foolishness." Some passers-by scolded him for playing in the streets, which were very dangerous for kids. He started losing hope. But in the middle of all that suffering, there were still small miracles. Fatima was one of them, a young waki seller who noticed Khalid hanging around her boss's stall one day. Instead of chasing him away like the others, she called him over and handed him a small plate of food. "Eat," she said simply. That meal filled more than his stomach. It gave him something else he had forgotten, a sense of worth. With tears of gratitude, he had a good meal. From that evening on, Khalid would quietly help Fatima pack up her tables after the market closed, careful to stay hidden whenever her boss, a stern, unforgiving woman, was nearby. He knew that if they were caught, it would be Fatima who suffered the consequences. In return for his silent help, Fatima would secretly slip him extra food or, on colder nights, an old blanket to keep him warm beneath the open sky. It was around that time that Khalid started to dream. He would sit on the pavement, watching neat schoolchildren walking past, laughing with heavy backpacks and polished shoes. He wanted that. Not just the food, not just the warmth. He wanted a life. But the streets don't let go so easily. One night, as Khalid was counting the few coins he had earned, a group of older boys surrounded him. They beat him mercilessly, took everything he had, and left him bleeding behind a market stall. Lying there, staring up at the endless night sky, Khalid whispered into the darkness, "God, if you can hear me, please help me. I don't want to die here." Maybe God heard him. A week later, an NGO group came through the market, handing out food and talking about shelters. Fatima pointed them towards Khalid. At first, he didn't trust them. He was ready to run. But something about the way they looked at him, like he mattered, made him stay. They took him to a shelter where, for the first time in his life, he slept on a real mattress, ate 3 meals a day, and learned how to read. It wasn't easy. Khalid struggled with trust. He lashed out sometimes. There were nights he still woke up screaming, but slowly, he built a new life. He learned how to write his name. He discovered he was good at math. He made friends who didn't hit or steal from him. Years later, Khalid stood proudly in his school uniform, giving speeches about street children, how they were more than just nuisances, more than thieves. Today, Khalid is a grown man. He runs a small organization called Second Chances Ghana, helping street kids find shelter, food, and hope. Every morning, when he walks past the same streets that once almost killed him, he smiles. Because he knows he survived not just for himself, but for every forgotten child who still sits alone by a gutter, waiting for a miracle. And in every child he saves, a little piece of Khalid is healed too. If stories like Khalid's touched your heart, consider subscribing for more powerful stories that need to be heard. A simple like helps us reach more people who care. Have you ever witnessed or experienced something like Khalid's journey? Share your thoughts in the comments.